From the Oklahoman newsroom, you're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenni Carlson here with Barry Tramel. Barry, it is late August, and we know what that means. Football season is almost here.
Here, here.
Yeah, exactly. But what it even more means is our football preview section is almost here, Barry. Air Raid is the theme, specifically Return of the Clones, Attack of the Clones, all things Star Wars as it relates to the Air Raid. And obviously the Air Raid brand new or brand new again in Norman. Who is most in the crosshairs of this Air Raid return in Norman?
Well, I mean, I think obviously we're all looking at the quarterbacks because of Baker Mayfield, but I think the offensive line's a question. It may be a good time to go to the Air Raid with a rebuilt offensive line. I've always thought the Air Raid was great for offensive line because they don't have to block that long. Right. They just sort of get in the way. Mike Leach did a lot of that at Texas Tech. Sooners are losing both offensive tackles. A guard, Adam Shedd. It's sort of a revamped offensive line. So I think that's probably a good thing. But you still got to, you know, if all you have to do is get in the way, you still have to get in the way. So let's see if those guys can do that.
Well, and you like Bill Bedenbaugh, right? I mean, if there's a guy to coach offensive line in the Air Raid, ding, ding, ding.
Bill Bedenbaugh. I didn't know this. Bill Bedenbaugh goes back to the original. I mean, he's like.
He's like the original Air Raid center.
Yeah, he's like he was at Iowa Wesleyan. He was Hal Mumme and Mike Leach's center.
Right.
When they actually their third year of being together at Iowa Wesleyan is when the Air Raid, what we consider the Air Raid, was sort of born.
Right.
They went to the no huddle, the up tempo, throwing it around, and their center was Bill Bedenbaugh, and now he's the. You know, he went to work for he went to work at Tech. Eventually went to West Virginia with Dana Holgorsen. And now he's back at Norman. Spent the last couple of years not in the Air Raid, but Lincoln Riley shows up. The Air Raid and Bill Bedenbaugh united again.
Okay, you make a great argument for offensive line, but I totally disagree with you because I think the position most in the crosshairs with the Air Raid move is the wide receiver. Now, you mentioned quarterbacks, and let's not forget they're going to have a new starter at quarterback. But last year, Sterling Shepard goes down. Nobody steps up. Everybody loves D.D. Westbrook, loved him in the spring game, but those wide receivers have got to bring it. Lincoln Riley asked about that earlier this week. He said, I don't have any concerns. We've got playmakers. I want to see it, Barry, because I'm not convinced yet.
We haven't seen it really since 2012 when Kenny Stills and Jalen Saunders, Justin Brown, that crew went on. Here's the deal. You got to have 6, 7 guys. Look at what we've seen out of OSU the last few years in the Air Raid. The Cowboys continue to run the Air Raid. They got 5, 6, 7 guys they can throw it to,
Barry,
and that's what works.
I think without question, OSU, any team, I don't know if I know TCU and Baylor's wide receiver core well enough to say this, but pretty much any other team, including Oklahoma, would take OSU's wide receiver core right now, straight up, and swap them because OSU's got great depth and talent at wide receiver. I don't think we've seen it yet from OU.
And you're right. OU's depth disappeared, and there's no excuse for it. I think it's why Jay Norvell's out of well, he's got a job now at Texas. It's a good job.
He's out of a job in Norman.
But he got dismissed from OU, and I think it's not because of coaching those guys. I think it was just collecting those guys.
Right.
Wide receivers fall out of trees, and that's almost a literal statement. I mean, Jalen Saunders, Justin Brown literally fell on their head.
That's right.
But
it took guys like that to be any good.
That's right, and they just haven't recruited well at that position.
Or developed, one of the two. We're going to have to see how these guys develop. I think that's a big question mark in this Air Raid. You're watching The Press Row. We're talking about the Air Raid because it's that time of year. Football season is upon us, and let's turn to Oklahoma State and talk about the Air Raid up there. It's maybe not the Air Raid of Lincoln Riley at OU, but it's very much a spread, and offensive line was a huge issue last year, Barry. Can the offensive line in the spread at OSU, can they get the job done this year?
Well, I think so, and I'm pretty encouraged. And here's what happened last year. They were young, inexperienced, and then they got hurt.
Yeah.
Lose some players beforehand. Then Zach Crabtree, a really solid tackle, goes down in mid-year. Zach Crabtree returned to the lineup against Baylor. And we all talk about Mason Rudolph coming back against Baylor and how things look different. Well, that's true. But when Crabtree got back, it helped solidify the line. The offensive line was not great those last 3 games.
But it was better.
Way better.
Oh, my goodness, way better.
And then they get the UA Victor Salaico from UAB transfer, gets to play immediately, going to step in at left tackle. I think they're going to be pretty good on the offensive line.
I do too. And, you know, they had a lot of issues last year. There's no doubt about it. And it finally felt like they found the key that unlocked the way it was supposed to be. And I think Zach Crabtree coming back was big. I think going to Mason Rudolph was a mental boost to the offensive line. But then you saw, I mean, let's not forget, Barry, in that Bedlam game, in overtime, they go down and just run the ball down OU's throat to win that ball game. And it was an offensive line and an offense that said, this is what we can do, try to stop us. And Oklahoma couldn't. And Oklahoma was pretty good up front last year defensively.
Very good, very solid.
So to me, the offensive line, you know, everything at this point is a question mark. Let's be honest. Maybe save wide receivers. But I think if you're Mason Rudolph, you've got to love the offensive line you've got in front of you, plus add in those Cowboy backs. Those guys, plus an offensive line, he's got to feel like he's going to be pretty well protected this year.
Yeah, now the only question, the big question about OSU's line, the depth is still not great. Mike Gundy talked about it today. He said depth at defensive tackle and offensive line, still not great. Everywhere else, very good depth, including quarterback, for crying out loud, where the depth's fantastic.
Yeah.
But if the offensive line at OSU can stay healthy, I think they're going to be maybe not as good as that 11 and 12 or that 10-11 bunch that was so good.
Right.
But still, back up to OSU standards.
Yeah, definitely a unit that Mason Rudolph or J.W. Walsh. Let's not forget, J.W. Walsh was part of the victimization of that offensive line a year ago. He gets hurt, and then we see what happens with Dax Garman. His confidence goes awry. I got to think if you're an Oklahoma State quarterback, you are going to be better protected, more confident out there with that offensive line this year. So lots to look forward to if you're looking for the air raid to get going in Stillwater. You're watching the Press Row with Jenni and Barry. Barry, let's talk about these openers for Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State starts a Thursday. They go up to Central Michigan. Mount Pleasant, Michigan is where they'll open, a place that I think only has a 2-lane road into it.
Somebody told me it's actually a 4-lane highway going into town, so maybe it's true.
Okay, so 4-lane road, but well off the main roads for sure. And then Akron comes to Oklahoma 2 days later to play against the Sooners in their opener. 2 Mid-America Conference MAC teams for these two to open against. Barry, we haven't seen a ton of MAC teams on either of these teams' schedules over the years, and for both of them to be opening, it's a little bit weird.
It's very strange. To my calculations, the Sooners have played a MAC team twice ever, OSU 4 times ever, and now here on the same weekend they each play. MAC football is traditionally very solid, very fundamental oriented, excellent coaching. You know, the MAC is really a farm system for the Big Ten in terms of coaching.
It's amazing how many coaches.
3 current Big Ten coaches were hired away from MAC head coaching jobs.
Right.
And lots of people came out of Miami, Ohio is the cradle of coaches, and we've seen a lot of good coaches come from the MAC. So good, solid coaching, but it's not great athletes most of the time. The speed advantage is going to be huge for the Sooners and the Cowboys. They both should roll. It'll be a tougher on OSU because they're on the road. Central Michigan is historically a better program than Akron. Here's the stat of the day for you, Jackie O. Akron has never won 8 games ever.
Ever?
And that's what Terry Bowden told me. Now, I don't know if he knows.
He's only the coach.
He's the coach. That doesn't make him the historian, but that's what he told me. He said, we've never won 8 games in a year.
Wow.
So it's really a program void of tradition.
Right.
Central Michigan's got pretty good. I mean, they've
won the bowl games.
They've won the MAC and done some things. They're currently in sort of a downslide, so Cowboys should really take care of them.
Right.
Speed advantage heavy for OSU, but the Sooners should just roll Akron.
Well, let's not forget the MAC and its place in sort of recent history in college football. It was only a few years ago that we saw Northern Illinois really kind of mess with the upper tier bowls. OU gets knocked down because of Northern Illinois, a MAC team.
Changed the course of OU recent history.
Right.
Because on that last game in the MAC, I think it was the MAC title game,
Yep.
Northern Illinois against Kent State. If Northern Illinois wins, they might move into the top 16, earn a Orange Bowl berth.
Right.
It's a tight game. Northern Illinois does win, made it to the top 16. OU gets pushed out of the Sugar Bowl instead of a match with Florida,
Yep.
which Florida wasn't very good that year. Probably
would have been a Sooner victory.
Probably could have won. They get sent to the Cotton Bowl, Johnny Manziel.
We know what happened.
Tears him up, and what does Bob Stoops say? Hey, I think I'll run that offense. What he didn't realize was that Johnny Manziel didn't come with the offense. So the Sooners.
It wasn't a package deal.
So for the next 2 years, in 2013, 2014, OU's running the zone read.
Kind of spinning its wheels, Barry. Let's be
honest.
honest.
And then Josh Heupel gets fired.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley's in with the air raid. Northern Illinois, completely the architect of that entire story.
So what we're saying is look out for the MAC, but maybe not in these openers. The MAC has had some impact, but they're not going to spoil the openers for these two teams. There's no way.
You wouldn't think so. The MAC is good for an upset almost every
true.
year.
That's true.
Usually against a Big Ten team.
Yeah.
Central Michigan waxed Purdue last year. But
I'm not sure that's saying much. Purdue stinks.
Well, Purdue does stink. We saw them 3 years ago in that Heart of Dallas Bowl.
They stunk then, too.
But, Akron beat Pitt since Terry Bowden's been there. So they're capable.
Right. I don't think against these two teams they're capable.
You know what? And going on the road, OSU. I mean, you can concoct a scenario by which OSU could find some trouble on the road.
Right.
You go to an out-of-the-way place. We saw it back in 2007 at Troy.
Yep. And you've got a quarterback who's only started 3 games.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it.
I mean, Akron's not going to put up a fight against OU, but the difference between 07 Troy and 15 Central Michigan is Troy had a bunch of fast guys that could play. They had some guys that are in the NFL.
That was a year after DeMarcus Ware. That was the type of talent they were getting at Troy.
And back then, and maybe still, I don't know, but Troy could get a bunch of partial qualifiers who couldn't get into SEC schools.
Yep, that's right.
Auburn would sign this guy.
They were SEC light.
That's exactly right. So I don't think that's what we're going to see out of Central Michigan.
Yeah, definitely not. All right, you're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenni here with Barry. And one more college football issue that has popped up, Barry, and frankly, I'm a little surprised at it. It's cost of attendance. This was an off-season issue that came up because the NCAA agreed to start paying cost of attendance stipends to athletes, basically to offset extra costs that athletes would have that they couldn't recoup really because they can't get jobs. It's just too hard to find work when you're a big-time college athlete. So they're going to start paying these cost of attendance stipends to athletes. Then we get news this week coming out of Virginia Tech that Bud Foster, the legendary defensive coordinator there, says, yeah, we're thinking about taking money from the cost of attendance stipends if guys mess up. Well, then Tommy Tuberville, the coach at Cincinnati, says the same thing the next day. Barry, Virginia Tech AD says there's no way we're taking the cost of attendance stipends. But then Tommy Tuberville says it. Could this be a problem?
Well, it is a problem.
Yeah.
They're not going to take cost of attendance money. It's just another example of football coaches being so unaware. They have no self-awareness. They have no idea how bad they look. A coach
Bud
making
Foster makes what, $600,000 a year?
Way more than that.
Oh, okay.
I think
over $1 million.
I think he's $1.5 million.
Oh, okay.
I've heard he's the highest paid assistant in America, even higher than the SEC guys.
Okay.
Bud Foster's he's unbelievably paid. Tuberville makes probably $2 million.
But let's take $50 if a guy misses
misses
a block or something.
They have no idea how bad they look. Now, in their defense, they're not talking about missing a block. They're talking about skipping class.
Sure.
They're talking about doing something knuckleheaded, on Saturday night after the game.
Right.
But you can't go. Football coaches who make so much money can't be talking about a financial penalty for these guys who are just scraping by.
Yeah.
You can't do it. So it won't happen. It'll be, it's going to be nipped in the bud, Foster, immediately. But just the idea, and
it's bad form. It's like a couple years ago when Bob Stoops was asked, I don't even know what the question was about, but he brings up his playing days, and I can't even remember what he said.
Yeah, something about a sandwich on Sunday night or something. Yeah,
it was just a bad look. It makes you realize. And I think it's one of the arguments that when you look at what Northwestern and their players did trying to form that union, just the idea of how far apart the coaches and the athletes are, it just adds to that, which, the reality is the coaches are making millions, the athletes aren't. It's largely on their backs. It's their jerseys that get sold. It's their likeness. It's their play that wins these games. So for coaches to suggest, hey, there's a little more in the player's pocket, maybe to help them make rent or buy groceries, But we're going to take some of that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And one thing you never see is in the college game, you never see coaches get fined.
That's
true. If you want to put a financial penalty on a coach, you withhold their bowl bonus for going to the Liberty Bowl.
Right.
You know, $20,000. You don't get your bowl bonus. So
when's the last time you heard of a college coach get fined? I was trying to sit here and think of it.
Fining is sort of, it's not really part of the whole
No.
college experience of any kind. It's a professional sports phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know, fine a baseball player for being late, or
Right.
a football player for
Or a
skipping a
team
meeting, or
for
something.
doing something, yeah.
You don't. It's just coaches talking without thinking, which frankly they do a lot of that.
But you know what? I heard something that, I can't remember if it was Virginia Tech or another school, that said that they had taken money from bowl stipends before. Players' bowl stipends.
Bowl financial, meal allotments.
Right, right.
So.
I just can't fathom that's happening, but I guess that it is. And again, it just adds to the whole air that it makes you wonder, what are these coaches thinking?
Just make them run. Just make it. If it's a minor offense at 6 a.m., you're going to run the stadium stairs.
What if I could pay a $20 and not have to get up at 5 a.m. and run
Well,
stairs?
yeah, that's right.
Now, what about that?
Be careful, coaches. You might just you might get what you want.
All right. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.